September 15, 1959, Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev arrives in the United States. It is the first ever visit by a Soviet head of state to America.
50 minutes late because of Atlantic headwinds, a Russian Tu-114 jetliner slides along the tarmac at Andrews Air Base near Washington. But what's 50 minutes when all the world's been waiting for months to see what would happen when the leaders of these two great power blocks met face to face?
Khrushchev's tour is to be a mix of official business and sightseeing. On the agenda are meetings with President Dwight D. Eisenhower and a tour across the country. The visit comes 4 years after Khrushchev's denunciation of Stalin and the Soviet repression of the Hungarian uprising. Mr. Khrushchev is accompanied by his wife, Nina Petrovna, and an entourage of 63 officials and bureaucrats. In his address, Eisenhower expresses optimism about Khrushchev's visit.
I most sincerely hope that as you come to see and believe these truths about our people, there will develop an improved basis on which we can together consider the problems that divide us.
As Khrushchev comes face to face with the American people for the first time, the reception is chilly. More than 10 years of Cold War conflict and hysteria has left most Americans fearful and distrustful of Khrushchev's intentions.
This will go down on record as the biggest silent reception in United States history. The frozen Met on a colossal scale. The crowds are there all right, packed tight every yard of the way, but almost the only sound comes from the bands.
To many of them, behind his cheerful smile, Khrushchev is the personification of evil, a viable threat to their democratic way of life. Later, Eisenhower and Khrushchev meet at Ike's private retreat, Camp David, where they discuss a range of issues, including Western rights in Berlin. After a successful meeting with Eisenhower, Khrushchev heads to New York City to address the United Nations. It is here that Khrushchev is greeted by a livelier group of Americans who are protesting Soviet repression in the Ukraine. In his speech to delegates, he calls for the world's nations to disarm in 4 years. On a tour of Washington, D.C., he is shown the Lincoln Memorial and the Washington Monument. He also visits the Capitol building, where just 5 years earlier, Senator Joseph McCarthy waged his crusade against communism. Next, Khrushchev is off to the American heartland. As he inspects livestock and chats with farmers, he resembles an American politician campaigning for votes. In a way, he is. Unlike Stalin and many hardliners in the Soviet Union, Khrushchev believes that peaceful coexistence with the West is in the USSR's best interest. The Soviet Union is still recovering from the devastation of World War II, and its economy is in shambles. Visiting America is one way to convince the West that although both countries have competing ideologies, they must work together to find common ground. But as Khrushchev arrives in Southern California, the biggest controversy of the trip occurs when U.S. State Department security fears prevent Khrushchev from visiting another great American landmark, Disneyland. Angered that he's denied a chance to see the Magic Kingdom, he is somewhat appeased by a visit to the set of the Hollywood film Can-Can.
The atmosphere in Washington may have been frigid, but Hollywood only knows one way to welcome the visitors, and anyway, even the State Department is having second thoughts about that order to be oh so distant. Show him a good time. Hollywood's glad to oblige. Mr. K thinks the dance itself mildly vulgar, but the dancing and the dancer are terrific, and he gets on famously with Louis Jourdain, Shirley MacLaine, and the rest. How long can the Cold War hold out against this?
Though Khrushchev's visit was a welcome thaw in East-West relations, tensions would arise in the next few years with the downing of an American spy plane deep inside Soviet territory, the building of the Berlin Wall, and later the Cuban Missile Crisis. This would bring the two countries and the world close to the brink of nuclear war. The missile crisis had a sobering effect on both sides and led to the signing of the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty in 1963. Khrushchev's visit was the first major step on the path to peaceful coexistence with the West, but his conciliatory actions angered Soviet hardliners, and his removal from power in 1964 signaled a return to cooler relations between the superpowers. war in Korea was over, and McCarthy had fallen from grace. But the communist threat loomed larger than ever as the 1950s drew to a close. In the 60s, wars hot and cold would be fought, from Vietnam to Czechoslovakia to Cuba. A technological battle would lead to the space race and a great triumph for America. But America also faced divisiveness and civil unrest at home during a decade that changed the world forever.